The engines are already running when he climbs into his seat. Warm vibration travels up through the metal floor into his boots. The radio operator adjusts his headset. Once, twice. The signal crackles, then clears. Outside the canopy, sunlight reflects off 5 aircraft lined along the runway at Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale. It looks ordinary. Too ordinary. A mechanic steps back from the fuselage and gives a thumbs up. Someone wipes oil from their hands on a rag. Another crewman tightens a loose strap near the door. Inside the cockpit, the air smells faintly of fuel and salt. The radio operator presses his earpiece tighter against his jaw. His mouth feels dry. He swallows. Ahead of him, the pilot runs through checks. Fuel, instruments, heading. Everything responds the way it should. Somewhere in the formation, someone jokes over the intercom about being home in time for dinner. Someone else laughs. 14 men across 5 planes. Pilots, gunners, radio operators. They don't think of themselves as a story. They think of themselves as crew. At 2:10 p.m., the wheels leave the ground. One aircraft, then another. The vibration deepens. The runway falls away. Florida shrinks beneath them. They rise into pale winter sky. The mission is simple. Fly east, practice bombing runs on a shallow reef, turn north, come home. They've done this dozens of times. The radio operator watches the ocean slide past beneath them. Blue, flat, endless. His headset hums softly. The first transmissions come through clean. Altitude confirmed, formation steady. From his seat, he can feel every small adjustment of the aircraft. Tiny shifts in pressure, a constant low roar in his ears. His jaw tightens without him realizing. They reach the practice area. The drops go as planned. Everything works. The radio operator logs times and headings in neat handwriting. This part is routine, almost boring. Then a voice cuts in. Their flight leader, Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor. Something in his tone is different. Not panic, just uncertainty. He says his compass isn't behaving correctly. He says he doesn't recognize the coastline. The radio operator glances at his own instruments. They look fine. Another pilot answers. His compass seems normal. Someone else says they might be over the keys. Taylor hesitates. The radio fills with overlapping voices. Static slips between sentences. The radio operator leans closer to his mic. His fingers tighten around his clipboard. Confusion enters the cockpit quietly. It doesn't announce itself. It just sits down beside you. Then something small happens. The compass needle twitches. Just once. Then settles somewhere that doesn't feel right. The radio operator notices it before he understands it. He doesn't say anything. He just writes the heading down. His handwriting shrinks slightly. Taylor gives new instructions. Change heading. Then another correction. Then silence while he rethinks it. Fuel continues to burn. The ocean continues to pass below. Inside the aircraft, the radio operator shifts in his seat. The pressure in his ears increases. He adjusts his headset again. The voices feel farther away now. Someone suggests flying west, toward land. There's a pause. Taylor doesn't answer right away. When he finally speaks, his voice sounds strained. He believes land is in the opposite direction. The radio operator writes the new heading. Carefully. No one argues. They trust their leader. They stay in formation. Minutes stretch. The sky begins to lose its clarity. Clouds gather at the edges. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to erase easy landmarks. The radio operator notices his mouth is dry again. He presses his tongue against his teeth. He thinks about how steady the engines sound. He thinks about how long they've been flying. He does not think about being lost. Not yet. Confusion still feels manageable. Panic comes later. In the second aircraft, the radio operator keeps adjusting his headset. The signal fades in and out. He catches fragments. Don't see land. Compass. Try heading north. He writes everything down, every word. He doesn't know why. It just feels important. Somewhere behind him, the gunner shifts his weight and peers through the side window. Nothing but water. The horizon looks wrong. Flat in a way that makes distance impossible to judge. Taylor speaks again. He says they're flying into whitewater. He says they'll keep going until fuel runs low. The radio operator feels his jaw tighten. No one in this cockpit knows they are becoming a story. They think they are solving a navigation problem. They think this ends with a landing. They think someone back at base is probably annoyed about the delay. He imagines coffee cooling in a paper cup. He imagines jackets hanging on chairs. He imagines explaining this later.
Back at Fort Lauderdale, instructors begin checking clocks. Flight time exceeds expectations. Radio calls go out. Some come back broken. Some don't come back at all. Inside the air, inside the formation, the radio operator hears Taylor hesitate again. Someone repeats it. West. Fly west. Toward home. Taylor's answer comes slower this time. He says no. He believes they're pointed the wrong way. The radio operator writes the heading. Fuel is still burning. Direction is still undecided. The aircraft keeps moving forward. The ocean offers no answers. Only distance. Only noise. Only sky. The radio operator presses his headset closer to his ears and waits. Someone says west again. Taylor pauses, then refuses. He believes land is somewhere else. They took off expecting to return. They are still flying, and their leader has just chosen a different direction. The first thing they notice is the time. Back at Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, someone taps a pencil against a clipboard. Flight time has exceeded expectation. Not by much, just enough to feel wrong. A radio operator leans forward in his chair and adjusts a dial. He calls out. No response. He tries again. Static answers. Somewhere in the room, a clock ticks louder than it should. They don't assume disaster. Not yet. Training flights run late all the time. Weather shifts, headings drift. Someone misreads a gauge. It happens. But then another call goes unanswered. And another. The officers exchange quiet looks. A map is pulled closer. Fingers trace expected routes across paper. Someone circles a section of ocean with a grease pencil. Inside the tower, a junior officer clears his throat. He says the name out loud. Flight 19. It feels heavier when spoken. Radio calls continue. Some fragments come back. Broken sentences. Half coordinates. Then nothing. No clear position. No visual contact. Just 14 men somewhere over water, burning fuel. They begin preparing search aircraft. Not dramatically. Professionally. Clipboards move. Engines are checked. Weather reports are reviewed. Someone hands a pilot a folded map. Another crewman pulls on gloves. In one hangar, a mechanic tightens a bolt twice, just to be sure. No one raises their voice. They are trained for this. Lost aircraft are found all the time. That's what they believe. A PBM Mariner rolls slowly toward the runway. Its hull reflects the late afternoon light. Crew members climb aboard. Each has a role. Pilot, co-pilot, radio operator, navigator. They don't talk much. They know why they're here. One of them adjusts his harness. Another runs a hand along the interior wall, feeling the vibration before the engines even start. Someone mutters they'll be back before dark. No one corrects him.
Inside the rescue aircraft, the radio operator settles into a seat. He plugs in his headset. the sound comes alive in his ears. Static, then voices, then silence again. He thinks about the men they're searching for. He imagines cockpits, headsets, dry mouths. He doesn't know their names. He doesn't need to. They're aircrew. That's enough. The rescue aircraft lifts off. Wheels leave the runway. Florida slides away beneath them. They turn toward open water. Sunlight glints off the ocean surface. From above, everything looks calm. Too calm. The radio operator starts logging transmissions, calling out headings, listening for replies. Every few minutes, he repeats the same message into the microphone. No answer. He writes the time. He writes it again.
Back at base, ships are also dispatched. Destroyers, patrol boats, search grids expand. Coordinates multiply. The map becomes crowded with circles and lines. Someone marks the last known transmission. Someone else draws a larger radius. The ocean accepts every line without complaint. Inside the rescue aircraft, the radio operator presses his headset tighter against his ears. Pressure builds behind his eyes. He swallows. The pilot asks for another radio check. He answers. Clear. They fly lower, scanning the surface, looking for oil slicks, debris, anything that doesn't belong. The water offers nothing, just repeating waves, just light and shadow. Then something small changes. Not in the sky, not in the weather, in the radio. A sudden burst of noise, sharp, loud, then gone. The radio operator stiffens. He checks his equipment. Everything appears normal. He makes a note in his log. He doesn't know why. It just feels important. Minutes pass. The sun begins its slow descent. The cockpit grows dimmer. Interior lights come on. The rescue crew keeps calling out. Still nothing. The radio operator imagines the other planes. Imagines pilots watching fuel gauges. Imagines hands tightening on controls. He imagines confusion spreading through unfamiliar cockpits. He doesn't say any of this. He just listens.
Back at Fort Lauderdale, someone quietly asks, "How many aircraft are still in the air?" No one answers right away. A lieutenant looks down at the map. Another officer clears his throat. Finally, someone says a number. It sounds smaller than it should. That's the moment. Not when planes go missing. Not when radios go silent. The moment when the room realizes, this is no longer a rescue. Then a transmission breaks through. Not Flight 19. Another aircraft reporting position. It feels like relief. Brief. They relay coordinates, adjust search patterns. The rescue plane banks slightly. Inside, the radio operator feels the shift in his stomach. The engines keep their steady rhythm. Everything still works. Coffee arrives in the operations room. No one drinks it. The clock keeps moving. Someone quietly asks how much fuel Flight 19 would have left by now. No one answers directly. They all know. They just don't want to say it.
Inside the rescue aircraft, the radio operator notices his mouth is dry again. He licks his lips. He checks the time. He checks it twice. They are far from shore now. The ocean beneath them has darkened. Long shadows stretch across the water. Low voices pass between pilot and co-pilot. Measured. Professional. They are not afraid. Not yet. They are focused. Then the rescue plane transmits something unexpected. A brief message. Calm. Almost casual. They report seeing a possible oil slick. Coordinates follow. Back at base, someone marks the location. Pens move faster. Orders are given. Other aircraft redirect. Hope flickers. Inside the rescue plane, the radio operator leans forward. He strains to see through the window. The ocean looks the same. No clear wreckage. No floating parts. Just reflections. The pilot circles. Once. Twice. Nothing confirms itself. They prepare to move on.
And then, silence. Not dramatic, not explosive, just absence. The rescue plane stops responding. One call goes unanswered, then another. At Fort Lauderdale, operators repeat the call sign. Again. Again. Static fills the room. Someone removes their headset and stares at it. Someone else says quietly, "They're not answering." No mayday, no coordinates, no final transmission. The rescue crew simply disappears from communication. Just like Flight 19. Different men, different aircraft, same quiet ending. Chairs scrape back. Maps are pulled closer. More ships are ordered out. More planes are launched. The search becomes larger, heavier. Now they aren't just looking for trainees. They're looking for the men who volunteered to find them. Men who believed they would come back. No one in those cockpits thought this would happen. They thought they were solving problems. They thought they were bringing people home. They thought this was temporary.
By morning, the maps are already crowded. Back at Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, grease pencil circles overlap like fingerprints. Someone has erased and redrawn the same search grid 3 times. No one remembers who drew it first. Coffee cups line the edge of a table. Most are cold. Some are untouched. They keep searching. That's the rule. Planes rotate in and out. Ships sweep slow patterns across open water. Coordinates are read aloud, written down, read again. Every few hours, a new crew arrives. Fresh eyes, pressed uniforms. They study the same maps. They ask the same questions. They receive the same answers. None. In the radio room, operators sit with headsets pressed tight against their ears. They call out. Wait. Call again. Static fills the gaps. One operator rubs his temple with 2 fingers. Another writes the time in a logbook, then crosses it out and writes it again. The handwriting is getting heavier, less careful. Someone asks if there's been any word from Flight 19. The room goes quiet for a moment. Then someone shakes their head. No. Nothing. They expand the search, then expand it again. New coordinates are added. New ships are assigned. The ocean absorbs every effort. It gives nothing back. At one desk, an officer flips through a report. It's short. Just times, bearings, weather notes, fuel estimates. There's no space on the page for how long people have been awake. No section for the way a radio operator keeps removing his headset just to breathe. No box to check for the moment someone realizes they haven't gone home in over 20 hours. Outside, another aircraft returns from patrol. The engines wind down. Crew members climb out slowly. Their movements are heavier now. A pilot leans against the fuselage for a second longer than necessary. A radio operator removes his headset and stares at it, as if it might explain something. No one asks what they found. Everyone already knows the answer. They hold briefings, short ones, standing up. People don't sit anymore. Maps are pointed at. Hands gesture over empty water. A lieutenant explains wind drift. Someone else mentions currents. They talk about probabilities. They avoid talking about time. In a quiet corner, a clerk sorts paperwork. He lines up folders, labels them, stacks them. One folder is for the missing trainees. Another is for the rescue crew. He pauses, then places them side by side. It feels wrong to separate them. Messages are sent to families, carefully worded, nothing definitive, just that aircraft are overdue, that search operations are ongoing, that every available resource is being used. Somewhere, a woman reads the same sentence twice. Somewhere else, a man folds the letter and puts it in his pocket. By the second day, Voices sound different. Lower. Slower. People stop rushing. They move with quiet efficiency. Everyone knows what it means when searches last this long. They don't say it out loud. They just keep working.
A navigator points at a section of ocean and explains how far debris might drift. Another officer nods. They adjust the grid. Again. Someone asks how much fuel the rescue aircraft would have had. No one answers right away. Eventually, someone gives an estimate. It's delivered softly, like bad news in a hallway. Then a junior officer asks something small. He doesn't raise his voice. He just says, "When do searches usually stop?" No one answers. Someone looks down at the map. Another clears his throat. That's the moment. Not when planes disappear. Not when radios go silent. The moment when everyone understands this is no longer a rescue. The reports get shorter. Earlier entries filled half a page. Now they take up a few lines. Time. Location. Negative contact. Negative contact. Negative contact. The phrase repeats until it loses meaning. Personal items begin to appear. A jacket left on the back of a chair, a notebook with a folded corner, a pair of gloves beside a radio console. No one moves them. They become quiet placeholders. In the operations room, a young officer finally sits down. He doesn't realize his legs are shaking until he stops moving. Across from him, another man stares at the map without blinking. Someone offers coffee. He waves it away. They authorize one last expanded sweep. No one argues. Ships have covered their sectors. Aircraft have flown overlapping patterns. Weather windows are closing. There is nothing new to add. But they approve it anyway, because that's what you do. Hours later, the final aircraft returns. The engines fade. Silence fills the hangar. The crew walks past the waiting officers. No one asks questions. The expressions say everything.
That evening, paperwork replaces urgency. Search logs are compiled. Coordinates are archived. Equipment is checked back in. Someone signs their name at the bottom of a form. It feels too small for what has happened. They don't announce an ending. There's no moment where someone says it's over. The operation simply slows. Flights become less frequent. Ships are reassigned. The radios grow quieter. Waiting turns into something heavier. Acceptance, maybe. Or exhaustion. It's hard to tell the difference. The trainees are still missing. The rescue crew is still missing. There are no confirmed crash sites, no recovered wreckage. Just empty grids and unanswered calls. History will later reduce this to lines in a report. Dates, aircraft types, crew counts. But right now, it lives in smaller things. In tired eyes, in untouched coffee, in the way people avoid looking at certain chairs. First, they waited for voices. Then they waited for signs. Now there is only quiet.
They never announce the end. There is no meeting where someone stands up and says the search is over. It just fades. Flights become less frequent. Ships receive new assignments. Maps are rolled up. The radios stay on, but no one expects them to speak anymore. At Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, desks are cleared. Temporary workstations disappear. Chairs are returned to storage. Someone erases the last grease pencil circle from the map board. It leaves a pale shadow behind. No one bothers to clean it completely. The official summary is brief. A few paragraphs. Dates, aircraft types, personnel counts. It states that 5 training planes failed to return. It notes that a rescue aircraft also vanished during operations. It lists weather conditions, probable navigation error, search radius, total flight hours logged. There is no section for how long people stared at the ocean afterward. There is no place to record the way radio operators kept their headsets nearby for days. There is no field for silence. Families are notified. Some already knew. Some were still holding on to routine. A door opens. A uniformed officer speaks carefully. Words like regret and unconfirmed and ongoing review are used. In living rooms across Florida and beyond, time bends. People sit down without realizing they're sitting. Hands cover mouths. Someone asks if they're sure. The officer does not answer directly. He never does. The trainees from Flight 19 are officially listed as lost at sea. So is the rescue crew. They become entries in records, names on plaques, numbers in archives. They are moved from operations boards into history. But systems move on faster than people. New classes of pilots arrive. They walk the same hallways. They sit in the same briefing rooms. They study navigation charts under fluorescent lights. Instructors point at compass roses. They explain wind drift. They talk about fuel management. They do not linger.
Outside, aircraft continue taking off. Engines rise. Wheels lift. Another group disappears into sky and cloud. Someone watches from the tarmac until the planes are too small to see. Then they turn away. The clerk with the 2 folders closes them. He places them into storage. They join thousands of others. He doesn't remember exactly where they go, only that the cabinet drawer was heavy, only that he had to use both hands. Over time, the story changes shape. It gets simplified, retold, compressed into headlines and summaries. People begin asking different questions. Not who, not how tired were they, but what happened. Speculation grows in the empty spaces. Maps are redrawn. Lines connect distant points. The ocean becomes symbolic. Absence invites imagination.
Years later, someone will give this stretch of water a name. They will frame it as mystery. They will overlay it with graphics and dramatic music. They will say, triangle. But that isn't how it felt at the time. At the time, it felt administrative. It felt procedural. It felt like cold coffee and stiff shoulders and eyes that wouldn't focus anymore. It felt like people doing their jobs until there was nothing left to do. There were no final radio transmissions, no dramatic last words, just a gradual loss of signal, then nothing. What remains are ordinary details, a training schedule left unfinished, a jacket still hanging in a locker, a navigation notebook with a dog-eared page, small artifacts that outlived their owners. Some of the pilots had written letters before they flew, routine ones, short ones. I'll be back soon. Tell Mom I'll call. They didn't know they were writing last lines. No one ever does.
For the rescue crew, there is even less. They launched knowing the risks. They didn't hesitate. Their mission lasted minutes longer than the paperwork recording it. Their names are sometimes mentioned, often forgotten. They disappear inside the larger story. The Navy eventually closes the case, not with certainty, with acceptance. Search efforts are officially suspended. Resources are reallocated. Files are archived. The ocean keeps its answers. But grief doesn't close like a folder. It lingers. It echoes. It waits quietly in people who are there. A radio operator who still pauses when static crackles. An officer who avoids certain coordinates. A clerk who remembers the weight of 2 folders in his hands. For the families, there is no wreckage to mourn, no grave to visit, just water, just horizon, just unanswered space. They learn how to remember without remains. They didn't fade into legend. They faded into paperwork, into filing cabinets, into typed summaries, into lines on forms, into families learning new routines, into a world that kept moving. History will keep retelling this as a puzzle, but the truth lives somewhere smaller, in empty chairs, in logbooks that end mid-sentence, in coffee cups left untouched. This is not a story about vanishing. It's a story about waiting, about procedure meeting grief, about how even the most organized systems eventually reach silence. And somewhere, long after the radio stopped calling, a headset still hangs on its hook, exactly where someone left it.